Welcome to Simple Things, where small stories spark big changes and growth begins with honesty. Kai never felt stupid, but he never felt smart either. He was the kind of kid who lived in the middle just far enough above average to scrape through conversations without being questioned, just far enough below brilliance to feel invisible. Not a genius, not a slacker, just muted. At 28, he worked in tech support. Not the glamorous side with AI and cutting-edge innovation, but the trench work. Fixing corrupted drives, recovering passwords, calming down angry customers who forgot to plug in their routers. Every day felt like déjà vu, every script the same. Have you tried turning it off and on again? He could recite it in his sleep. But what gnawed at Kai wasn't boredom. It was something deeper, something darker. It was the slow-growing suspicion that he had missed the window. That the years when people developed their edge, when minds sharpened, when synapses stretched toward brilliance had passed him by. And now his brain felt like a fogged mirror, slow to process, easy to distract. He forgot names, lost his train of thought mid-sentence, struggled to finish books. And every time he watched someone speak fluidly, solve problems, instantly hold 3 ideas in their head and juggle them like flame it burned, he wanted more. Not just to be productive, not just to focus, not just to get things done. He wanted to feel alive inside his mind, to think clearly, to retain knowledge, to understand deeply, to learn faster, speak sharper, hold his own in any conversation. He wanted cognitive power, not as a weapon, but as a rescue rope to pull himself out of the mental mediocrity that was suffocating him. And one day, after forgetting a simple word in a meeting, logistics of all things, Kai sat in the stairwell of the office building, head in hands, heart pounding, and thought, what if I've already peaked? What if this is it? That night he went home and typed into his browser, fingers trembling, how to get insane cognitive gains. Reddit was the first result. And what he found wasn't a miracle drug, wasn't a pill, wasn't a biohacker in sunglasses selling dopamine tricks. It was a messy, scattered thread of people all hungry like him. Some chasing clarity, some chasing memory, some just trying to think without drowning in distraction. But buried among the comments, Kai saw something that would change everything. Cognitive gain is just like muscle growth. You don't wait for it. You build it. Through pain, repetition, adaptation. You don't think your way out. You train your way out. Those words hit him like a slap, because he had always wanted to be smarter, but he had never trained his mind like a muscle. Not truly. Not with structure. Not with intensity. And certainly not with pain. Kai didn't know it yet, but he was about to enter the hardest training of his life, not in a gym, not on a track, but inside his own mind. And once he started, there would be no turning back. Kai's first attempt at cognitive training was a disaster. He bought a planner, a thick leather-bound one that smelled like productivity. He made color-coded goals, subscribed to 4 newsletters, downloaded an app called Neuroforge, watched 7 YouTube videos with titles like Increase Your Brain Power by 300% and Top 5 Habits of Geniuses. And for 2 days, he was on fire. Woke up at 5 a.m., did Sudoku, ate salmon, meditated for 11 minutes, told himself this was it. By day 3, he was staring at the blinking cursor of a Pomodoro timer, utterly paralyzed. Not by laziness, not by distraction, but by shame. Because for all the biohacks and routines, for all the tools and tactics, his mind still felt slow, heavy, resistant, like trying to bench press while underwater. It wasn't that the habits were bad, it was that they were too external, too cosmetic, too disconnected from the deeper current that ran through his life. Kai didn't just need tricks. He needed to build mental grit. And to do that, he had to train like an athlete, not a self-help tourist. So he did something radical. He wiped everything clean, deleted the apps, burned the planner, logged out of every productivity guru he followed, and he built something brutal, simple, unforgiving. A mental gym. It started with one rule: no passive learning. Ever. If he read, he summarized. If he watched, he taught it back. If he studied, he quizzed himself. Every piece of knowledge had to be earned, like weightlifted, not information consumed. Second rule: track your struggle, not your streak. He stopped celebrating how many days he stayed on track. Instead, he started tracking how many times he pushed through discomfort. The moment his mind begged to switch tabs and he resisted. The moment he hit a wall in a book and rewound it anyway. The moment he forgot a concept and chose to relearn it rather than feel stupid. Kai realized that focus was pain. The kind that sharpened, not numbed. And every time he chose pain, intentional pain, he grew. He started with 20-minute reading sprints of material way above his comfort zone. Philosophy, neuroscience, dense articles, no summaries, no videos, just raw, unfiltered thought. At first he retained nothing. His mind wandered. He reread the same paragraph 5 times, but by the second week, something shifted. His mental stamina stretched. He could go 30 minutes, then 45, then an hour focused. He added deep recall sessions, no notes, no peeking, just him and a blank page. Write everything you remember from yesterday's reading. At first, it was barely a sentence, but eventually, it became paragraphs, and then full concepts, and then syntheses, connecting ideas across books. His thinking stopped being fog. It started becoming architecture. Then came the verbal sparring. Kai joined a small online debate forum, not to win, but to struggle, to fumble through arguments, to face the terror of being wrong publicly, and to train the speed of his thoughts under pressure. The first time he entered a thread, his hands shook. He mistyped words, misunderstood the other person's point, but he stayed. And by the 10th debate, he wasn't just speaking faster, he was thinking faster, clearer, sharper, more flexible. Because now his mind wasn't just a warehouse of ideas. It was a battlefield tested agile alert. The transformation wasn't dramatic. He didn't wake up one day and feel like Einstein, but the shift was undeniable. People noticed. Conversations that used to drain him now energized him. He remembered more, expressed more, understood more. And one day, during a meeting at work, something extraordinary happened. His boss brought up a complex systems error, one that had the team stumped for 2 weeks. Kai listened quietly. The others brainstormed, and then without hesitation, he spoke. He walked through the root cause, suggested a layered solution, linked it to a concept he had read in an obscure cognitive science article weeks earlier. Silence. Then, "Holy shit," someone whispered. And his boss looked at him and said, "Where did you learn that?" Kai paused, and for the first time in his life, he didn't feel lucky. He didn't feel like he stumbled on a good guess. He felt earned. "I trained for it," he said, "but no climb is endless ascent. Every transformation, no matter how inspired, eventually meets its wall." Kai hit his 3 months in. At first, the changes were exhilarating. His thoughts felt electric, his words clearer. Even strangers noticed something in his eyes, a kind of alert stillness, like a mind always quietly calculating, searching, connecting. But then came the dip. The progress slowed, the feedback quieted, the breakthroughs stopped. And most painfully, the hunger vanished. Kai would sit at his desk with the same dense book that once thrilled him and feel nothing, blank, numb, like all the spark had been drained out of the pursuit. He pushed harder, doubled the sessions. He tried willpower, then caffeine, then guilt. He told himself it was laziness, weakness. a relapse into who he used to be. But deep down, it wasn't fatigue. It was emptiness. Because the wall wasn't external. It was existential. He realized all this time he'd built a brain like a weapon. But for what? He wasn't solving world problems. He wasn't building something meaningful. He was just training, growing, optimizing, endlessly, for no purpose. And it hit him one morning while watching an interview with a war journalist who spoke 10 languages and had lived in bomb zones for years. The man wasn't just smart, he was directed. All his intelligence was aimed not at performance, but impact. That's what Kai lacked. His cognitive gains weren't empty, but they were disconnected from meaning. It was like training in the gym for years and never stepping onto a field. That realization crushed him. For 2 weeks he did nothing. No books, no debates, no drills. He walked. He cooked. He sat on benches and watched birds fight for breadcrumbs. And in that stillness, something subtle began to return. Not drive, not ambition, but curiosity. Pure, raw, childlike curiosity. Not how do I get smarter, but what do I care about enough to suffer for? It was a harder question than he expected. He remembered a quote from Viktor Frankl scribbled into a notebook months ago, forgotten. Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. Kai had mastered the how. Now, he needed the why. So he made a new rule in his mental gym. No input without intention. From now on, every book, every argument, every hour of focus had to serve a living question, not a goal, not a metric, a question. He started small. Why do people fear silence in conversations that led him to books on communication, psychology, shame, which led to experiments in real life, which led to new observations, which led to new questions, and suddenly, his mind was on fire again. Because now cognition wasn't a game, it was a searchlight. He joined a think tank forum on cross-cultural intelligence, not because it was on a list of smart things to do, but because he cared. He started mentoring younger guys in his community on critical thinking, not because it was noble, but because it helped him synthesize. He was no longer training his mind, he was living through it. And in that switch from self-improvement to self-application, something deeper than motivation returned joy. The joy of seeing your thoughts actually move the world, not just inside your head, but out there in real rooms with real people making real impact. And just as he was finally finding rhythm again, a message landed in his inbox. A stranger. No profile picture. Hey, I've seen your comments on the cognition threads. You ever thought about helping design educational tools for disadvantaged students? Kai stared at the screen. Something about that message made his heart stop. Not because it was flattering, but because for the first time in his life he had something to offer that was actually useful. And he realized maybe all those lonely hours, all those internal battles, all that mental weightlifting had been preparing him for something he never could have predicted. Kai didn't reply right away. He read the message again and again, not because he doubted its sincerity, but because it felt like a doorway. And deep inside, a voice he hadn't heard in years whispered, "This might be it. This might be the thing you've been preparing for." The offer came from a small, scrappy team based in Manila. They weren't a formal organization, just a few passionate educators, programmers, and activists trying to build cognitive training tools for kids in under-resourced communities. They had no funding, no fancy branding, just an idea and a burning question. Can intelligence be unlocked even in places the world overlooks? Kai's gut said yes. Not because of blind optimism, but because he was one of those overlooked minds once. Born in the back streets of Saigon, raised by a mother who could barely finish middle school, taught to survive, not to think. No one looked at him and saw a sharp mind. But that mind was always there, silent, watching, begging for something to stretch toward. And now maybe he could be that stretch for someone else. He set up a call. It wasn't what he expected. Their office was a plastic table in a converted garage. The team lead Mavi spoke with the speed of someone who lived in a constant state of vision and urgency. There were 3 others on the call, all under 30, all exhausted, all burning with this wild belief that kids in slums could learn logic, language, and philosophy if only someone built the right bridges. Kai listened more than he talked, but by the end of the conversation, he leaned in and said softly, "I've spent a year learning how to get smarter. What I didn't learn until now is why it matters. If you'll have me, I'm in." And that moment changed everything. He didn't quit his job, didn't announce a life shift on social media, didn't declare his calling. He just started showing up every night after work for 2 hours, every Saturday morning, researching, sketching, testing, finding ways to turn complex ideas into playable puzzles for 12-year-olds with nothing but a phone and curiosity. At first it was clumsy. He had to unlearn the academic density he had fallen in love with, realize that being smart wasn't about sounding clever, it was about making understanding contagious. He found himself asking new questions. How do you teach abstraction to someone who's never had space to wonder? How do you help a kid believe their thoughts matter in a world that's told them otherwise? And each time he'd hit a wall, he'd think about his own past. The night his uncle yelled at him for asking why the stars moved. The way the teacher brushed him off when he questioned the textbook. The time he stopped speaking in class because no one ever listened. He knew the cost of curiosity being crushed. And now he could protect it in others. Then came the breakthrough. One of the tools he built, a game-like exercise that taught analogical reasoning using urban street slang, went viral in a small network of schools in Cebu. Kids were competing, laughing, solving logic chains using stories from their own neighborhoods. Teachers reported a 30% increase in classroom participation, not because of discipline, but because the students started asking better questions. That night, Kai sat alone in his apartment, staring at the blinking cursor on his screen, and for the first time, he let the realization sink in. I'm not just smarter. I'm useful. I'm real. His cognitive gains weren't trophies. They were tools, and now they were in service to something larger than himself. That changed how he saw everything. He began training again, but differently. No more chasing metrics. Now it was, what mental models help teachers? How can I simplify game theory for 10-year-olds? What makes critical thinking stick in chaos? His intelligence was no longer inward. It was a bridge. And as his impact deepened, so did the weight. Because now, he wasn't just building knowledge. He was building hope. The first time Kai stood in front of a classroom in Manila, he didn't speak for a full minute. Not because he was nervous, not because he didn't know what to say, but because he couldn't believe it was real. 25 pairs of eyes stared back at him, some curious, some bored, some already hardened by too many disappointments. There were plastic chairs, flickering lights, and a whiteboard so stained it looked like it had lived a dozen lifetimes. He took a breath. Then he picked up a marker and wrote just one question. Do you think your brain is special? The room went quiet. One girl near the back, Elma, maybe 13, squinted and raised her hand. Special like. Smarter than others. Kai smiled. Special like. Able to do more than you've been told it could. That cracked something open. And for the next hour, he didn't teach at them. He invited them into riddles patterns, word games, decision trees. He used street slang, local folklore, TikTok references. He met them where they were and pulled them a little further. By the end of the class, half the kids had leaned forward. By the next week, they were staying late. By the end of the month, they were bringing their siblings. Kai wasn't trying to be a hero. He just kept showing up, kept listening, kept tweaking the code, changing the metaphors, translating Plato into playground challenges. Every gain he'd ever made in cognitive speed, retention, flexibility, he was now folding into their journey. And something else was changing too. He was no longer ashamed of his mind. For years, he had worn his intelligence like armor, sharp-edged, silent, separate. But now it was fluid, connected, alive in every conversation, every shared laugh, every small breakthrough. One day, after a long session, Mavi sat down next to him. "You've changed," she said softly. Kai didn't deflect, didn't shrug or make a joke. He just nodded. "Yeah, I think I stopped learning just for me and started becoming for them." That night, walking home through the humid streets, Kai passed a child sitting under a flickering streetlight solving one of his logic games on a cracked phone. She looked up and grinned. Not because she recognized him, but because she understood. And in that moment, Kai felt it. Not pride, not achievement, but a deep, warm quiet. The kind that comes when the noise in your head finally aligns with the beat of the world around you. The kind that says, this is what it means to grow. Not to accumulate more, but to become more. To let your mind be a gift, to let your journey be someone else's doorway. He turned the corner, the city lights softening in the distance, and with each step, he knew this wasn't the end of the path. It was only the beginning. If Kai's story moved you, if it sparked something inside, don't let it stop here. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with someone who needs to believe their mind can grow. Because the truth is, it can. And maybe, just maybe, your journey will light the way for someone else.